So what has Crabber's Wharf got to do with the D-Day landings? Let's go find out. And what you see behind me is things called Phoenix Caissons. And these caissons were made specifically for a floating harbour over on the D-Day landings of the 6th of June 1944. 148 of these caissons were made, and they were dragged out on D-Day to form Mulberry harbours, which are temporary harbours, on Arromanches and on Omaha Beach. Now Omaha Beach was the American section, and Arromanches was the British section. I'll tell you a little bit more about them. Out of 148 of these caissons made for the Mulberry harbours over the D-Day landings, 10 were actually brought back. 2 are still here. There's a couple more around this area that have broken up, but 8, as far as I remember, or as far as I know, 8 were actually taken to Holland. About 1953 they had a really big flood and a big disaster there. So 8 of these caissons were used to basically plug the hole in a dike that had basically blown, or a dam that had basically given. Now the dike's been fixed, so the dam's been fixed since. The caissons now over in Holland are actually museums. Now these caissons here, they were acting as breakwaters. Then the Mulberry harbours would basically fit inside that. In other words, it was trying to quell the waves or quell the ocean, so at least these ships could land and start to offload a lot of the equipment, like the soldiers and the ammunition and the resource and the supplies that they needed. So these caissons need to be there, they need to be dragged there and basically set down to create this temporary harbour. Now these caissons had nicknames called whales. The pontoons, which you'll see, the floating bridges, they were called beetles. And they also took old ships and sank them as breakwaters, and they used to be called gooseberries. These 2 units I left behind are used as windbreaks for the boats around this area. Now in 2017, 6 statues were installed on top of these caissons. They're actually representing 2 American GIs, 2 British sailors and 2 dock workers. The reasons why these caissons were made was because the Allies knew that the Germans had held all the major ports along the French coast. So if they were going to attack in Normandy and land in Normandy, they needed to take the run, because the Allies knew that all these ports would be heavily defended anyway, so it wasn't worth it to them. They could have lost more lives than doing what they did here. So these caissons, as well as the rest of the Mulberry harbours, were designed and dragged across on D-Day. On the 19th of June 1944, there was a big storm over at France, which destroyed Mulberry, which is Omaha Beach. You can still remnants of that still over, and if you go to Utah Beach, some stuff still there actually. It rendered useless, so they started to use them called landing ship crafts or landing ship tanks, which are LSTs, which was just as successful as going armour and supplies and men off onto Omaha Beach once it was cleared. The Mulberry Harbour Arromanches was still intact at the time. They've carried on using that. You can still go there now and you'll still see quite a lot of the old caissons that are floating around there. And low tide you can go along and walk along and have a look at them. Each of these caissons is 60 metres long, which is 200 feet. The 20 metres wide, which is 65 feet. And the 50 metres high, which is 50 feet. And they weighed 7,700 tonnes, or 8 million kilograms of concrete and steel. These concrete caissons, when they were sank, they put these Mulberry harbours on, these floating platforms, and it was very similar to Churchill called them piers, because they were just like piers all across the United Kingdom, like for instance Brighton, Llandudno in Wales, Blackpool up in the northwest. And the idea is they need to make sure that the tides didn't affect these massive ships that would offload
goods, supplies, men, equipment. So they needed these piers basically to do that.
In the 10 months that the Allies used these floating harbours, these caissons, they'd unloaded quite a lot of stuff on the beaches. 2.5 million men, 500,000 vehicles and 4 million tonnes of equipment to supply the line going on towards Berlin and winning the Second World War.
While we're at Crabber's Wharf, or at that time it was called Castleton Pier, this was a major embarkation point for the soldiers that were billeted round here for the D-Day landings. I'll give you some idea of what went from Castleton Pier in regards to troops and equipment. Between the 5th of June and the 7th of August 1944, 418,585 troops embarked from here across to Normandy beaches. 144,093 vehicles. Some of the divisions that left here are fairly famous. You've probably seen some films that have been made of them actually. One was the American 1st Infantry, which was called the Big Red One. The American 29th Infantry, called the Blues and Grey. And they're all destined for Omaha Beach. They landed at 6:30 on the 6th of June. At least 2,000 men lost their lives on that day. And they said that one US unit lost 90% of its men. Now there's a lady called Carol Tuckwiller. She was a librarian and geologist. This lady carried out a study on behalf of the National D-Day Memorial Foundation to see how many Allied lives actually lost, so how many Allies had lost their lives just solely on the first day, which is the 6th of June. She worked out that there was 4,414 personnel that lost their lives just on the first day of the landings. The invasion fleet was made up of this statistic. It had 8 different navies. This included 6,939 vessels, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 ancillary craft, 864 merchant vessels, 195,700 personnel involved. After the war in Europe was over, which was the 8th of May 1945, a lot of the soldiers were buried with their comrades across Europe, and you can go and visit these war memorials anywhere in Europe. They're well looked after and cared for, but a lot of the people, American families, wanted their loved ones repatriated, so quite a lot of them actually were repatriated as well. Many of those soldiers that were actually repatriated back to the USA actually came back to Castleton and then were on obviously larger ships, our biggest ship, to go back to America. The Americans call this port the biggest little port in Europe. I'd love to have flown the quad over them 2 caissons, but it's fairly windy. It doesn't feel windy down here, but we're sheltered. But up there, 50, 60 foot up, it's pretty windy. And I don't know, I don't want my quad to just fly off. So I've done the best I can. This bit here is a port, and obviously I can't fly off the port. I've tried to get in, but I can't get in. I've tried to look around different areas where I can view these caissons, because they're really interesting. And they're part of our history. And if any Americans or any other Europeans are watching this, it's part of your history as well. So anyway, I'd just like to thank you all for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on the next video. And thanks again.